Hello and welcome everybody to today's Lunch and Learn with Business and Heels. Thank you for joining us. Welcome. I know everybody's coming in from different places today. Please feel free to pop some stuff into the chat box as we go through today's session. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kirsten Gunnis. I'm the operations manager here at Business and Heels. Quite often you'll find me in the background or facilitating sessions such as these. As you go through today's session, if you do have questions, please add them to the chat box, and where appropriate, we'll sort of get those answered by our wonderful guests of today's Lunch and Learn session. So let me introduce them. So today we have a wonderful company called Infinite Edge, and they're going to be talking to us about cyber intelligence. So they have actually created a comprehensive roadmap to optimize and secure your key assets, which is time, team, and technology. And in today's environment, with high-profile data breaches and escalating cybercrime, building on your cyber resilience is a paramount activity as a business owner. And so we understand some of those challenges being a small business owner as well. And so does Intelligent Edge. And they're going to talk to you about some of the strategies that you can employ in your business. They're going to explore things like cyber resilience, looking at risks associated with cutting edge AI platforms like ChatGPT. And there's lots of strategies that they have got and implemented for their clients around staying ahead of cyber adversaries. So it's a bit of a transformative environment with AI now coming in. So I want to introduce the Infinite Edge founder, Marty Hack. So welcome, Marty. And he's been a prominent figure in the field of IT and cybersecurity for the past 25 years. He has an extensive depth of knowledge in systems protection and tech problem solving. He has also delivered innovative and cost-saving business practices to numerous clients. His grounded and down-to-earth approach is quite well received by those who work with him, and he'll tell it like it is, but it'll be in a language that you can actually understand. So I'm going to pass this over now to Charmaine, the CEO of Infinite Edge, and also Marty, and I'll let you take it away. And I'm very interested in learning some of those things that we can do to protect businesses today.
Thanks, Kirsten. So Marty's surname is actually Hack. I know Hack seems very appropriate for the type of business that we're in.
My apologies.
No, it's all good.
Don't worry, you're not the only one. It happens a lot.
We've both got names that are a bit challenging to pronounce. Marty, over to you. I think Kirsten's done a lovely job of introducing you, but you might want to just go through your background bio here, tells people a little bit about you personally.
Yeah, sure, no worries. Thanks, Chaz. So as the two ladies already said, that I am the founder of Infinite Edge. Chaz is actually my business partner now. So I started the business though on my own 13 years ago now. Actually, no, it was last month. It was 13 years. So and yes, I've been doing this a long time. This is my second business actually in IT, so second IT business. And we provide, so cyber intelligence is what we call it now, but so we're securing and optimizing business technology, but we'll go into that in a bit more detail a bit later on. But that's what that cyber intelligence term means. And yeah, absolutely passionate about this. Otherwise, well, you'd hope that I'd be passionate about it because I've been doing it a long time. If not, then I'd be pretty miserable by now. But it's exciting. I mean, it's changing at a rapid rate, and there's lots happening, as we all know, and especially in the space of AI and automation. But the cybersecurity side doesn't go away, and even though it seems to have sort of taken a bit of a backseat in the media since the whole Optus and Medibank breaches, when everyone was interested in talking about it, it's still important. And it's, like I said, it never goes away. And in fact, even more important now with AI and automation, because a lot of people don't think about it when they just dive headfirst into this AI stuff like ChatGPT and don't realize what they're doing, what information they're actually giving away, and are they being secure enough when they're using these tools. So, and in a personal level, yeah, I'm a father of two, a lovely wife, and we live in a beautiful part of the world, Great Ocean Road in Victoria. So very lucky to live down there. Most of the teams actually in Melbourne. We are a remote team. We do have someone in the Philippines as well, and soon to be a second person there, which we're interviewing for at the moment. But yeah, it's lots of fun what we do. So as I said before, so this is what we do, and we coined this term cyber intelligence because what we really wanted to do is make sure that our clients understand that technology and cybersecurity don't sort of coexist independently. They're very much integrated, and everything that you do, you should be thinking about cybersecurity when you're interacting with technology, because it's such an important and such a huge risk for businesses these days. It doesn't matter what size you are a target, and we're going to talk about that a bit later on, and why you're a target, even if it's just you, if it's just a solo hero. And so yeah, well, obviously we want to secure but also optimize businesses' technology. And we actually have a sort of a three-pronged approach, and that's why, and it's in that order as well. So time, team, and technology, and I'll go into those in a bit more detail and explain what that means. Sorry, just moving my mic around. This is one of my favorite sayings because it really hits home. Everything is hackable. So it doesn't matter how much security you put behind it, you are going to suffer some sort of cyber attack, some sort of cyber data breach, some sort of scam. It is just the way it is, unfortunately. We're in the risk mitigation business, not the risk elimination business. And this is a great saying to go with that. You may expect the best, but you've got to plan for the worst, and you need to be prepared to be surprised. And that's a really good mindset to have when it comes to this sort of thing, because otherwise it's just as important to try and prevent these sort of things from happening to your business and to you, but you also need to be equally prepared for when it does happen. And what do you do then? So I know this is overwhelming, and we get that feedback a lot. So you know, it's okay where you are right now. It's okay if you're sitting there going, I haven't got any of this stuff in order. You've got to start somewhere, and I don't blame anyone for wherever they are, because there is a real lack of education and awareness in this space. So for the thing I always say to people is just start with one thing, and it's already going to make a difference, and it'll start you on your journey. So these are some scary stats here, and this is what I was saying before. It doesn't matter what size business you are a target, and it's because you have money, you've got cash. Well, maybe not physical cash, but digital cash, and that's what they want. And it's actually a really great opportunity now to make a distinction between scamming and hacking. I think this is something that people often use the term hack. I got hacked. My Facebook account got hacked. My email got hacked. My bank got hacked. Most of the time, and most of the crimes that we see are not hackers. A hacker is actually someone sophisticated who can actually crack into a system and uses their skills and their tools to actually hack an account, like literally hack into your account. This is not how this happens most of the time. Most of the time you're being scammed, and it's unfortunately, and it makes people probably feel a little bit bad, because it's much easier to blame a hacker because then you're actually exonerating yourself. But most of the time, the reason you're being scammed is because they've manipulated you, or you have poor security. So it is a really huge distinction. But why it's so important is because you need to take ownership of cybersecurity and say it's your problem. It's not your IT provider's problem. It's your problem. You need to know what's going on. You need to take ownership of it. You can't, and to say hacker hacked me is easy to just sort of pass the buck and go, well, someone else outsmarted me and got into my account. So that's why it's really important to make that distinction. And as I said before, it doesn't matter what size your business is. 43% of cybercrime is small business. And the really scary one here is that over 60% of small to medium businesses don't survive a data breach within 6 months of when it happens. And that's usually because of loss of reputation or financial loss. And it's just hard to come back from. You can see the other ones there. I won't go into all of them. But actually one of them there is really important too, and that's the one about the antivirus. A lot of people think an antivirus, that's all they focus on. They think, well, I've got an antivirus on my computer, I'm safe. That's not true, unfortunately. In fact, most of the things I'm going to talk about are far more important than an antivirus. And these days you could probably, and I'm not condoning this, I'm not saying you should do this, but you could probably live without an antivirus and still be at less risk if you do all these other things, because they're not 100% accurate. They're not going to protect you from everything. And a lot of the risk and a lot of the crimes happen because of social engineering. And we'll talk about what that is and what it involves a bit later on. And insider threats, sorry, that's insider threats as well. Sorry, Shaz, I took a bit of a longer pause then. Insider threats is something else that people need to be aware of. Now, a lot of businesses actually, they spend all their effort, their time and their resources on trying to keep the bad guys out, and they don't look about the insider threats. Now, threats insider doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be a malicious team member working for you. It could also be unintentional. So the majority of data breaches are actually caused because of human error. And it could be something as simple as they accidentally send confidential information to the wrong person. Happens really easily. And that is what's considered a data breach, depending on, what information is being leaked. But those things are really important, and that's why education and awareness is so crucial. So no surprise, we haven't got, we do have, is that the latest stats, Charles? I think they are, yeah. They've just been released. Or maybe it's, it doesn't matter. It does change every year, but no surprise, the government's on the top of the list in terms of targeted industries. You'll see a bit of a shuffle here over time, but again, it's healthcare. No surprise again. You look at the Medibank disaster, where every single customer had their confidential patient information leaked, and not only that, really confidential information like date of births and addresses and mobile numbers and things like that. Tax file numbers were also leaked. So much so that even that I was also a victim. I was both Optus and Medibank. So much so that every time now I do anything with the ATO, I have to ring them. They have to lift a ban on my tax file number because someone's tried to steal my identity. And the only way they can do anything they can do is put a permanent lock on my tax file number. But it also hinders you to be able to go into MyGov and do all these sort of things, which is really, really frustrating. And we know people that have actually been had massive tax bills because someone's defrauded them and pretended to be them, and it's a real mess trying to clean that all up and trying to prove that it wasn't you. So we talked before about time, team, and technology. So this is the way that we approach our cyber intelligence, and as it's at the top, cyber intelligence maturity. So for us to work with a business to improve their cyber intelligence, we focus on these three key areas. And as I said before, in that order. And the reason it's in that order is because, so as you can see, time's all about process. Having solid processes in the business, we all know as business owners how important that is. And without having those in order, you're not setting up your team for success. So we're in the process now, as I said earlier, of onboarding a new team member. And every time we do it, we learn something new. But our motto is we want to set them up for success. And how do we do that? By having the right processes in place, by having the right training, the right structure, all those sort of things. But also really important, and this is often overlooked in a lot of organizations, I would even say most organizations, is when they're onboarding a team member, they don't do enough training. And I'm talking about we all use tech. It's part of everything, of every business now. It's such an important part of every business. And the amount of training that a team member gets in that technology is either, it's very limited to virtually none. And as you can imagine, everyone has different skill levels and they may not have used this technology before. So you want to set them up for success. You don't want them to start in the organization on the back foot and not understand something, and then they have to spend months and months upskilling and getting to the level where everyone else is. So we really make an effort there in training, and we make sure that we work with businesses so that they have a solid onboarding process, and that includes very intensive training in those areas. And then finally, and this is the last piece, is the technology comes on top of that, because without the first two, you don't want to throw technology at it. And I think you've all probably experienced this at some point. I know we've done it as well, and that's because technology is so easily accessible these days in this cloud world. You know, you can Google what's the best CRM. You can Google and find, reviews and comparisons, and then go, oh, HubSpot or Infusionsoft or whatever it is that you're using. Oh, that's the best one according to the research I've done. But what does that actually mean? The best one for what? Do you have a process for selecting technology? Do you have a checklist? Do you align it with the processes that you already have in the business? Because otherwise you're trying to use technology to fix a business problem. And technology won't fix a broken or missing process. It's actually just going to amplify it. And so a lot of the time we see this time and time again, people just introducing and rushing new technology, and the team gets frustrated. They're not onboarded properly. The technology, they're 6 months into implementation and realize it doesn't actually speak to one of their other apps, and then they've got information where it's siloed. Then they scramble and they go, oh, is there a Zap for it? A using Zapier, if you've heard of that. Essentially trying to connect the two. It just gets messy. So really important to have a process for choosing technology, and like I said, most businesses just don't, and end up in a bit of hot water as a result. So I'd like to run a bit of an exercise with you all. So it's like, we want to make this as interactive as we can, so you're not just listening to me speak. So it'd be interesting to see in the chat, just throw in some, and if you don't have three, that's fine. I'd just like to see some answers. Just what are your top three pain points, frustrations when it comes to technology and cybersecurity? I'll give you a few minutes and we'll see how we get, what kind of answers we'll get. Thank you, Trish. First cab off the ranks. Absolutely. I love that saying, Trish. I always say, you don't know what you don't know. And the same applies to technology and cybersecurity. And I think that's why I'm not judgmental like some people in our industry can be. You know, they get very upset if you're not doing certain things and you haven't got certain things in place. But again, you don't know what you don't know. If you haven't been shown it, if you've never been educated in it, how would you know? Thanks, Morag. Trying to learn in advance of purchasing. Yes, absolutely. That's what I just covered before. Absolutely. And some don't work too. Yes, 100%. We actually are in a business community where there is a business where they work in China. So we're well aware of that. And there's a Facebook group. They can't post in Facebook. A lot of the tech that we talk about, they can't use. It is very frustrating, and it makes it really, really difficult to run a business. Complexity of UI, Steve. Correct. Yeah, that's true. That's true as well. Absolutely. And that's right. And that's the thing. That's why I think it's like with everything. It's, my mum's old school. She's German. She survived the war. So really frustrating. And I'm using this story as an example because it's a very good one. And she will believe anything a doctor will tell her. And I always say to her, you need to get multiple opinions, because just because they're a doctor doesn't mean they know everything. And that's my motto to life and also to business, is you need to get multiple bits of advice and make up your own mind based on the advice that you've been given, because it doesn't matter how confident someone seems in what they're telling you. Even me, everything I'm telling you now, go off and ask someone else and see what they say. And they may say something different, and that's okay. Trish, what have you got there? Complexity and lack of simplified training. Yeah, that's right. Exactly right. And I think in this world of tech, things are often overcomplicated and unnecessarily so. there's some real, there are some really complicated platforms out there, but also sometimes we make it more complicated than it needs to be. And that's why I often say everything should work on paper before you actually even look at their technology. And that's where the processes come in. So what is your process? Have you ever mapped it out before? Just get a pen and paper, old school. Yeah, thanks, Morag. It's very common, like I said, and you know, don't feel bad if that's if it's happened to you or is happening to you. All right, so let's break down time a little bit. Thanks for all your answers, and really good to have some contribution there. So time, like I said, is all about process, and we call it time because, you know, having solid processes gives you back time to you and your team. So that's why it's what we call it time. It's so important. And I mentioned that before. You know, I've said that it won't fix, technology won't fix a missing or broken process in the business. There's also not a silver bullet. So this is another thing that comes up very often, not just technology, but also in cybersecurity. And again, you know, I'm using that saying, you don't know what you don't know, right? So a lot of people think that some cybersecurity expert can come in, solve all your problems, and then they can disappear and you won't have to worry about anything again. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Same with technology. You do have to have it maintained and you have to have it managed. Now, I know that in some businesses, depending on your maturity of your business, you may not have the budget, and that happens, right? And so therefore, a lot of smaller businesses might have an ad hoc relationship with an IT guy or an IT provider. And I say IT guy because most of them are, unfortunately, and there's a lot of them out there. But break, fix, and ad hoc, unfortunately, isn't going to serve you very well, because if you're only calling them when something's broken, what are you missing? What gaps are there? You need to be on top of this. A computer needs to be managed constantly. It needs to be updated. It needs to be maintained. It needs to be monitored for alerts, you know, security and other ones as well. And all of this is an ongoing proactive arrangement rather than a reactive one, which we see a lot of. And so that's why it's so important to have that sort of ongoing relationship. And again, it is difficult sometimes if you don't have the budget for it, but it's something you should definitely work towards as soon as you can. Just like with bookkeeping, right? I did my own books when I started my business, and I handed that off as soon as I could. I only did that because I wanted to learn the intricacies of financial numbers and optics and all that sort of stuff, because I had no idea. But it's not a good use of my time, and neither is doing your own IT. And yeah, so we talked about solid and onboarding, offboarding processes. Another thing that we really like is, so clear rules of the game. That's what that stands for, ROTG. One really cool exercise that we've done internally, and we also do with clients, is a comms cleanup. So, and that's communications cleanup. So essentially working out what are you using for what type of communication. And that's really important, because if you're getting emails sometimes from team members, sometimes you're getting a Teams message or a Slack message or a text message, it's really hard to sometimes find that information. So it really just slows you down. So cleaning it up, putting some rules in place. I'll give you an example. We don't use email at all for internal communication. So much so that if someone internally sends us an email, we have to actually, they have to tell us that they are, because we may miss it. It's such an inefficient way of communicating, and things like Teams and Slack are much better for that. So that's just an example. Also having processes. And so a lot of cybersecurity, it's not just tech, a lot of cybersecurity is also around just processes. So we see a lot of these, like I said, scams and happening where financial loss occurs, where someone, for instance, forges an invoice and say they've changed the account details. You might have seen or had this happen to you before. A simple process like picking up the phone and having to double check that with the supplier or the client or wherever it is will stop something like that dead in its tracks. But a lot of people don't have those processes in place. So and sometimes they are, like I said, very simple. Co-signatory, really important. So we've worked with businesses that have lost hundreds of thousands of dollars from a CEO apparently sending, well, they did actually, because their email was breached, an email to someone to say transfer 100, I think it was 180,000, something, that might have been more, and they did it without even questioning, and that money was never retrieved again. So it's just so important having these processes in place. And like I said before, just as important having an incident response plan in place, so knowing exactly what to do when something does happen. Privacy policy you would have probably heard about already. You may already have one, or you should have one. Data breach response plan. So that's really important. So certain industries are subject to the notifiable data breach laws that are relatively new. They're a few years old in Australia. And so if you're in healthcare, anywhere that handles anything that handles like tax file numbers and things like that, but you have health information as well, doesn't matter how big your business is, you are automatically subject to these laws. So if you have a data breach and you don't report it the right way and to the right entities, you can get fined substantially. If you're a $3 million plus business, you're automatically eligible. So really important to know. And we've talked about the evaluation process for new tech, but really important to ask questions, you know, so talk to your vendors. What's their security like? You know, Shaz and I have just recently looked at some, you know, marketing platforms, and we could not believe that they don't even have multi-factor authentication on them. Or single sign-on, which is not as secure, but that means like you're using your Google account to log into it, for instance. It's better than nothing, but it's just amazing at how many vendors still don't have that. And we're going to talk about multi-factor, or MFA, as I like to call it, later on, and why it's so important. So another exercise. So if you could just throw some numbers into the chat, and again, we're not judging here, so don't be shy. The last time I did something like this, there was a 2 or a 3 throughout these, and that's totally fine. Like I said, you know, it doesn't matter where you are right now. So give yourself a score out of 10, how you would rate your processes around technology and security, as I talked about before. Thanks, Trish. 6, 3 for Mena. Thank you for your honesty. And like I said, it's okay. It's absolutely okay. And that's why you're here. And the fact that you're here is already great, right? You're educating yourself. Thanks, Steve. 7 processes for security. Okay, great. Yeah, okay. Well, again, thank you for your honesty, Morag. And that's good. And now you're here. Now you will think about it, right? That's I'm glad I can make a difference in your life. All right, thanks, guys. Let's move on, Shaz. So let's talk about team next, or your people. Now, some of you, like I said, may not have a team yet, and that's okay. I was a solo hero for many years. I know what that's like, wearing many hats. Yes, thanks, Morag. Yep, exactly. And that's what, as I said, I'm glad you're here and you've already taken the first step. So yeah, people are so important. In fact, probably they are the most important thing in your organization. So I know that there's a saying, your customer always comes first, but I disagree. I think your team always comes first, because if you treat your team well, they'll treat your customers well. So it is really important to set them up for success. And we use that term a lot. So you'll hear it a few times probably in this session. Empowering them with training, not just when you're in the onboarding, as I mentioned before, but throughout their career. So we do something within the team internally called a professional RPM, and I always forget what that stands for. So Shaz might be able to explain what that stands for. But essentially what we do is we sit with the team and they fill out a spreadsheet and they tell us what their aspirations are, what they want to aspire to, what kind of further education they want to do, or development, that sort of thing. It could be personal, could be related to the business, but we really care about that because we really want to make sure that they feel heard and that they feel like they're part of something. Onboarding process, like I said, I've already talked about that. That's so important, and it really sets them up for success, but it also sets your business up for success. Because just imagine how much of a difference it would make if every team member that came into your business just was absolutely blown away by the onboarding process and just go, wow, that is the best place, the best experience I've ever had onboarding. And it just, you know, puts you in a good light with them from day dot, and they're going to tell their friends, they're going to tell everyone else, and you'll start to be a business that attracts people. And in this current environment, that's what you want to be, because it's so hard to find and retain good people. Cybersecurity, and it's often handled to, I said this before, you have to take ownership of that. It is not something that you can just put your head in the sand and say, hey, my IT guys across it, because they aren't, unfortunately. And I'm going to I'll go through the list first, and I'll make another distinction for you. But yeah, you really need to own it and drive it from within. And that doesn't mean you have to do it all yourself, but you need to be across it and be aware of what's going on. And you need to be asking questions. Is this done? Has this been done? Are you guys looking up at my systems constantly? Are you doing updates? Where are the reports for that? You know, why am I still logging into this app and it doesn't have multi-factor authentication? These are the sort of questions you should be asking your providers, for those of you that have them. We always recommend appointing a cybersecurity champion in the team. You know, usually just one for a smaller team, and a tech champion, so they can share that role essentially, because it's, like I said, it's not just, they're not mutually exclusive. Or if you're a larger one, you might have a team, a larger business, you might have a team. And again, regular security awareness training, because you don't know what you don't know. So how are you going to know what risks to look out for, what to look out for when you get a dodgy email, what to look out for, not to click on, all those sort of things, and what to do when something does happen. So just before we go on, Charles, I'm going to make this distinction. So I said before, it's not your IT provider's responsibility. And I also said that they may not actually be across it. Unfortunately, IT providers and cybersecurity providers are very different. There's not that many IT providers that also are fully across cybersecurity. They may claim to be, but that's also not their fault. I don't blame them either for that, because they're expected to be, and they may just not want to lose face by admitting that they're not. So they're not going to know all the nuances around cybersecurity because they've got too much of other things to do. They've got to look after all your systems as well. We made a conscious effort in our business to actually do both. And that's because we found that the cybersecurity consultants out there, they don't do implementation. So they'll come in, you can pay them a lot of money, they'll do an audit, they'll tell you what to do, but they'll expect your IT provider to do it. And if your IT provider doesn't know how to do it, then you've paid all this money and you're actually not going to get the results that you need. So we realized there was a real gap there. So that's why we do both, because, and yes, you may think that's a conflict of interest. Yes, we do get external cybersecurity consultants to come and prove and try and poke holes in what we do, because we have to, right? We want to hold ourselves accountable just as well. But that's why it's a really important distinction. Thanks, Shaz. So yeah, security awareness training is really important. And we have actually really come across an organization that does it on a regular basis. It should be done weekly, ideally. And there are platforms out there to make it easy for your team to do that, like self-learning ones, like the learning management systems that were big in COVID, just like that, little quizzes, little videos, really short, sharp things. And some of them are quite fun and engaging. And it's so powerful, because humans are the biggest risk, as you can see by this slide. 95%, and it probably even more than that, because not all breaches are reported. So a lot of breaches don't get reported. So this is the only basic and unreported breaches. So I'm sure that is closer to 100, probably 99 point something percent caused by human error. And it is staggering, isn't it? So this is some examples of what's included in a security awareness training platform. And I won't go into all of them, but like I said, that can be very fun, and you're gamifying it. So people, these days people like that. It's engaging, it's fun. It doesn't have to be boring at all. And you may have heard the term dark web. If you haven't, what that is, it's essentially where all the bad guys hang out. So in fact, most of the internet is actually made up of the dark web, more than what you see. So these are like secret sites that you can't access from a normal browser. And that's where all of the data breach information gets leaked when something like Optus and Medibank happens. So this is exactly why people get their emails broken into, or their accounts broken into, or, like I said before, or their social media accounts. Now, when people say my Facebook got hacked, it didn't get hacked. You didn't have multi-factor authentication on it. You were probably involved in, I'm going to use this as an example, the Optus breach. You probably use the same password in your Optus account than you do for your Facebook account. And all of a sudden, someone is actually a scammer, it's not automated, sitting there and logging into your account, and then, hey presto, they're in, because you don't have the security in place and you're reusing passwords. And then they get in, they'll lock you out. Social media is such an important one because if you have a business page, if you've got a personal account that's not secured, you lose access to that, they'll lock you out, you'll lose access to your business page, and Facebook are not going to help. we have seen time and time again Instagram and Facebook users frustrated because they're like, oh, why aren't they helping? Well, they don't have the resources to, and they're not really interested in helping. So you'll have to start again. And if you have a lot of followers and a lot of content, that's devastating for a business, especially if you're an online business. And yeah, there's a few other things in there in security awareness training. I won't go into too much detail, but we can move on to that, Charles, from that. So that's why it's so important. So in fact, pretty much every breach that we've worked on is as a result of social engineering. Now, social engineering, if you haven't heard that term before, it means essentially it's manipulating people. So these scammers, and again, I'm calling them scammers because they're not hackers, they'll send a phishing email, blast phishing emails out to thousands, millions of people, right? So you would have seen them come in purporting to be from like your energy company or Australia Post, and it's a tracking item, and they'll take you to a website that looks legit, it looks real, but what they're trying to do is they're trying to get you to log in or something and give away your credentials so they can then try that on other accounts that you've got. It is actually not very sophisticated. But it works, and it's because people, again, don't know what they don't know. They have the same passwords or variations of those passwords across multiple sites, and they don't have the security in place. So they are easily manipulated into gaining access to, and essentially what they want to do, they want to get into an account that has money. So, and I'm not talking just about a bank. I'm talking about, and we'll go into a detailed breach later, but there's a really common one where they'll get into your email and they're looking for invoices, and then they jump on that and they'll change the invoice and they'll get paid instead of you. So that's essentially what it is. That's what they're after. And then they'll disappear. So social engineering attack examples. I won't go into all of them again. There's a whole bunch of them. And there's some ones that you would now, the newish sort of ones that you would have seen. So smishing is like, you would have got text messages like, oh, hi, mum, I lost my phone. This is my new number. That's a really common one going around. I don't even answer my phone anymore if I don't have the number stored in my phone, because the amount of times I get scam calls, it's ridiculous. And they're all examples of scammers trying to somehow bait you into something. Phishing is that where they send you an email, they're trying to phish for your information. That's why it's called phishing. Spear just means they're targeting you particularly. Whale means they're targeting someone high profile, and on and so forth. Like there's so many different ones. I get ones on WhatsApp, from some lady in, I don't know where she is, and she's tries to start a conversation with me because she's saying that she I don't know, wants to find a life in Australia or something like that. And it's just, they're trying to bait you, and they're trying to target, hoping that I'm lonely and that I'll engage and then probably get scammed. So this is also a scary stat, because what it tells me, and also if you remember back when Toll got hacked, I'm wondering whether they got hacked. I can't remember now off the top of my head whether they got hacked or whether it was a data breach. It could have been another scam where someone got into the system. But either way, I think in their case it was a hacker. They got hacked twice and in a short period of time, because and again, larger companies, sometimes the larger they are, the slower they move. So if they don't have certain things in place to actually then fill the gaps and plug the holes, it takes a long time. And then absolutely devastating. Like a client of us told us the other day, they were dealing with a company and they couldn't basically put an order through. They had to go back to pen and paper because their systems were completely ground to a halt. So it happens, and it's so difficult for businesses sometimes to, like I said, do the right thing and then plug all the holes. And then that's why they keep getting breached, because the scammers or hackers, depending on which one it is, will start seeing that this is a really easy target. Another exercise. All right. So score out of 10. So based on everything I've just said, and I hope I haven't scared you too much. I'm just opening the window. Sorry, it's a bit warm in here. What do you rate yourselves in terms of technology and security based on what I just said? See some scores in the chat, please. Good question, Trish. I'll answer that in a second once we get to see a few more scores. 5, 7. Okay, cool. Okay. Thanks, Steve. Some nice scores there. And it is interesting too, like I do say technology and security, but we generally do combine the two, as I said before, because they overlap so much. And sometimes you don't realize that there's a component of a technology that also needs as a security aspect. So that's also really, really important to remember. Chinese account in May 5. Okay. Yep. Okay. Thanks, Anna. So you had a question there. How can you tell if it's a scam? So there are some telltale signs. Trish, was you, Trish? Yes. Okay. There were some telltale signs. Look, I won't go into too much detail just because we will run out of time, but there's a couple of things you can do. So if you get a phishing email, you don't click on anything for starters, or if you suspect it's a phishing email, it might be an attachment, it might be a link. First of all, look at the sender address. So even though it might say National Australia Bank, for instance, you'll see that if you hover over the email, or you can even click on the email, sorry, the email address, that's safe to do. You'll see that the email address is actually not from the National Australia Bank. So then you'll know straight away it's not coming from them. That's the first giveaway sign. Poor grammar, poor English, that sort of thing. But also they might have a link to, say, the NAB website, but if you hover over it, don't click on it, just in case it's trying to install something on your computer. If you hover over it, if you use something like Outlook, it will actually show you the link, the address of the link, and you'll see it's probably not a NAB website. So these are just a few tips that you can implement. This is a really good website. So if you haven't heard about this one before, it is safe to use. And the reason is because you're not giving away a combination of username or email and password. It's one or the other. So this site actually has a database of all known breaches. So you can put your email address in there. It will tell you if your email was ever involved in a data breach, a known one, of course. And if you didn't know about it, and you've been using the same password for 10 years, time to change it, obviously, and turn on multi-factor authentication for anything that offers it. We're going to talk about how to do that and some tips around that in a second. But there's also a section here where you can put in a commonly used password. Now, you're not putting in both together, so you're not giving away your credentials to someone. This is actually run by a cybersecurity expert, but an Australian site actually, and you can put just the password in by itself, and it will tell you if that was involved in a breach as well, because those things get leaked and put on the dark web. So really, really cool exercise to do, and an eye-opener. So lastly, in terms of the three areas is technology and profit. If you do it well, it's profitable because it's going to save you time, it's going to make you more productive, and especially now around automation and AI. Like how great is some of these innovations around with ChatGPT? We use it every day in the business. So let's talk about some of the technology that we deal with. So one of the things that we do first and foremost when we bring on a new client is we do an email deliverability health check. What that means is that, so when you set up your domain, you don't know what a domain is. So whatever your at infiniteedge.com.au, right? That's our domain. So when you set that up, you actually have to set up certain records in the hosting side, and that means it'll tell people where to send emails. It'll tell people where to go for your website. So when I say where to go, like they put in that address, and it will direct them to the right area or the right server to get to your website. Those records are all in there, but there's also other records around emails that a lot of people don't realize are so crucial, especially if you're doing email marketing. And even just general emails. You don't want your emails, your important emails, landing in people's junk, because you may miss out on business opportunities. But if you're doing email marketing, most marketing emails I get all end up in my junk mail. And it's not just because a lot of people think, oh, that's just the way it is, right? It's not. It doesn't have to be that way. There are ways you can actually beat the spam filters at their game, but we don't know the secret sauce, because if we did, then we'd make a lot of money. But also, but there are guides on how to make an email less spammy. But part of it is getting the records right. So these three records here, SPF, DKIM, and DMARC, we have never seen a client or come to us that have got those three set up properly. Some of them don't have anything set up properly. Some of them only have one. SPF we might be familiar with. So that means if you're using, say, MailChimp or a CRM to send out emails, you need to find out what the SPF record is, and you can just Google that for that particular service, because they're sending on behalf of you. And if you don't put the record in, they're going to end up in junk every single time. The DKIM is another way of authenticating the domain. So there's a few of them, they just keep adding more and more ways. So you can really just make sure that it is you that is actually sending these emails. So they're trying to avoid people using your email address to send emails and pretending to be you, or, you know, spammers or scammers and all that sort of stuff. So the third one, DMARC, unfortunately, you need an IT provider or someone who knows what they're doing and knows about DMARC. They have to, it's a hosted service. To set that up properly, someone has to look after it and manage it. It's not something you can just do yourself and just put that record in and forget about it. It has to be managed. But it is the first two you definitely can do yourself. And, you know, there's just a way of, you can Google it basically, essentially, depending on what your email, who your email provider is, and what services you use, like MailChimp and CRMs and that. The other part of it, like I said, even if you sort that out, it doesn't mean you're going to automatically get everyone's inbox, but there are different things to look out for in an email. These are some of the examples. You don't want to have poor grammar. You don't want to have spammy words in there, and there are certain words that the spam filters don't like. And we actually have a tool that we can run emails through to give the score and give some feedback on how spammy your email is, essentially. Email hosting service, Morag. So yes, if you're running a business, Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace, don't even look at anything else. If you guys are still using POP, like when I say POP, like if you're still downloading your emails from GoDaddy or Crazy Domains or something like that, that is not a fit for business email solution. It's risky because you're not getting it backed up on the server level. You're then downloading it on your computer only. That's risky. You can't sync contacts and calendars, and it's just not a very reliable service. And it's actually quite easy for hackers or scammers to hack, to sort of infiltrate, I suppose, is the best way to explain that. IMAP's the same. So again, Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace is really the only way to go when it comes to this in a modern business, I would say. And yes, you have to pay for a per license, per user, essentially. And yes, I know Crazy Domains and GoDaddy and the likes are cheap and cheerful, but I just wouldn't go there. So this is actually you can actually go here and do this now and have a look. So this is a free tool. If you go to that URL, you'll be able to see exactly what I'm talking about, whether or not you have these records correctly set up or whether they're missing. So you can do it now, or you can do it later, but this is the place to go. And then how do you fix it? Well, you'll need to have a bit of knowledge around managing your, what they call DNS records. And that's the records I talked about. So if someone set up your domain for you, well, actually, I shouldn't say that, they would probably know. That's a dangerous thing to say. Unfortunately, a lot of web designers will manage this sort of thing, but they have no idea how to manage records. They just don't, it's not their expertise, and they shouldn't be doing it really, but they do. So when we take a client over and they've got their web person managing all this, we take it off them straight away because we've just had some bad experiences. So generally it is an IT person that would be best off to ask. So yeah, multi-factor authentication. So or MFA, sometimes it's known as 2FA, but it's now MFA, the more likely MFA, because there's more than just a secondary way of authenticating. Some sites are still only stuck in the 2FA space, meaning that they might only have an option to send you a text message, but a lot of them have options. So they'll have like a different, and I'll talk about them in a second, what the different ones are. Actually, you can go to the next slide, Charles. Yeah. So these are the different types. So So I've actually listed them here in order of from least secure to most secure. So if you have MFA set up and where a code goes to your email, not secure. Why? Because if your email's already breached and they're in there, they can just go to any one of your sites. It will, as long as they've got access to your passwords. And if your passwords are sitting in your email, for instance, which often they can be, again, a big no-no, ideally, you should really use a password manager. We'll talk about that one later as well. If they're in your email and they get the code, well, then they've got access to your other accounts. Simple as that. Microsoft used to really be a fan of the push notifications. So if you're a Microsoft 365 user, you would be familiar with that, where you have like the Authenticator app, and then when you try and log in, it says approve or deny. Now that's no longer recommended because there are things called fatigue attacks where people, scammers or hackers, will just bombard this account and it keeps coming up on your phone, and people get sick of it and just go, oh bloody hell, approve, and then they let them in, or they accidentally hit approve, or they think it's them and they hit approve, and then all of a sudden they've given someone the keys to the kingdom. SMS also not ideal. Unfortunately, some services still, that's the only option they give you. So some MFA, any MFA is better than none, but I'm just giving you some examples of why it's not all, they aren't all created equal. SMS is not secure because there have been known cases of identity fraud where someone can actually take over your phone account pretending to be you, and then they can transfer your number to another provider, and all of a sudden they then can get into your accounts by getting the code sent to them. It has happened, and it does happen. Authenticator app is probably the most common one, and probably the easiest to use out of these in terms of the more secure ones. You've got, or set up at least, you've got a Google Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator. There's quite a few different ones, and I'll list them on the next page. But and that's where you just scan a barcode as QR code, and then you've got that 6-digit number that changes every 30 seconds. So once you put your password in, it asks for the number, and away you go. There are more secure iterations of that. The 2-digit code one is a popular one with Microsoft now, and you can go a step further with Microsoft, for instance, and use passwordless, which means then you don't even put your password in anymore, which means it also can't get stolen. So that's why it's most secure. And this is how you figure out how to turn on MFA for every account that you're using. So Google, simply just Google that phrase and insert whatever app it is in there. And if they do have that option, they're going to have a knowledge-based article probably on how to enable it. And that's going to make it easier for you to then just turn it on. And they won't force it on you unless it's like a Xero or banking software. They do force it on you. Even banks don't force it on you, surprise, surprise. And some banks, I cannot believe, ANZ, for instance, do not have multi-factor on their logins, and they just haven't introduced it. I just don't understand it. It amazes me that the banks don't have that sort of technology. This is why it's so important. In fact, every data breach that we have worked on with clients could have been avoided by simply having MFA on, because they didn't have MFA on their accounts. So that scam I talked about before, where someone got into their email, waited for an invoice, and then duped the invoice, would have been stopped if they had MFA on their accounts. Again, providers like Microsoft and Google, they won't force it on you. You have to actually enforce it in the organization. Microsoft is starting to now make you set it up, which is good. As in, like, they'll take you through the process. You can still opt out of it, but they'll bring it up and prompt you to do it, which is great, I think. These are the examples of the Authenticator apps, like probably the market leaders, I would say. And what's good about all of these as well is that they can back up. So I don't know if you've had this experience before. It is so frustrating because I've got about 50 on mine. If you're not backing it up, if you change your phone, you're going to have to set them all up again. And that's so frustrating. So these ones back up, which means that then you get a new phone, you just restore from backup, and you've got all your codes back there as well. So we'll talk about vulnerabilities next. And so vulnerabilities is essentially just usually caused by outdated software. That's the main reason that and that's why like hackers, scammers, whoever it is, bad people are always looking for vulnerabilities. They're looking for vulnerabilities in software, in your website, just somewhere to break into a system. And that's why you're constantly getting these updates pushed on you. And why, if you've got a WordPress website, you have to really be careful, because you constantly got to update the plugins. Otherwise, you may get your website hacked. And one single update that's missing can expose hundreds of vulnerabilities. I'll show you in a second from a tool that we have. It's a bit small, but you can see here that, say, Google Chrome, you'll see that this example was just missing one Google Chrome update, and that's how many vulnerabilities that one update addresses. So, software vendors are always a step behind, because there's always the bad guys are trying to find ways to get in. And so they've always got to be reactive rather than proactive, unfortunately. And there's a few other slides here. We won't go into too much detail because we're just mindful of time, but this is just one of the tools that we use and can run on computers and tell us what vulnerabilities are on there. We monitor these constantly for clients. Gives them a grade from A to E. And we can make sure that they're always at A level, essentially, by addressing the patches and the updates. Another example of a report that we pull from that software. Another thing that really people often overlook is older hardware equipment. So even hardware has software within it that runs it, right? So a lot of people upgrade their computers on a regular basis, but when's the last time you've upgraded your router or your modem? It might be 10 years old, and you probably, unless you've got certain providers like Telstra, will push out updates to the modem, but not everyone does. And if you bought your own one, well, then it's on you to update it, and you probably don't know how to. So if you don't have updated routers software, often they get exploited by hackers, and then they can get into the system and wreak havoc from there. So like even switches, so data switches, like if you're in an office where you've got the blue cables into the hub, well, that's a data switch. They also have software that needs to be updated, because again, that can be exploited. So we generally recommend as well replacing computers every 3 to 5 years. 5 years big maximum, probably, because of warranty issues. With a business grade laptop, you'll get a 5-year. We can get a 5-year warranty max. You want a warranty on a computer ideally, and then what happens after a while? If the computer's too old, it's not going to get updates anymore, and then you're vulnerable. Same with software. Operating systems. If you're using older operating systems, like an older Mac that doesn't update to the latest OS X, or if you're still using Windows 7, big no-no, because it's no longer supported. You're not getting the updates. You're a massive risk from vulnerabilities. So password managers. So we talked about that before briefly. So this is the only way you should really manage. Yes, sorry, Anna, I'm running a bit over time, so I'll really race through this one. Thanks for coming. So password managers, yeah, you really should only use a password. You should use a password manager to generate passwords, but also store passwords. So you should, the idea is you should never actually be thinking of your own passwords. And these, and people go, oh, but that's bizarre. They can't get their head around it. But think of the headspace you'll free up if you only have one password that you have to remember moving forward. And that's the password to your password manager, because everything else is created by the password manager and stored in there. So you don't have to remember them anymore. There's an add-in to the browser. You can automatically log in from that password manager, which means you'll never have to know the password. We generally have like 20 random characters as a standard. If you go to the next slide, Shaz, you'll see that's probably the market leaders in the last password managers at the moment. So any one of these are pretty good. There are others, but you can't go wrong with any one of those. And this is an example of why a complex password is so important. So you can see how easy it is to crack a password. If you know what your passwords are, then you'll be able to go across this grid and say, okay, there's a numbers only, say it was uppercase and lowercase and it was 7 characters. Well, it still takes 25 seconds only to crack. So it is something you got to think about. That's why our 20 character one, it's in the last column there, numbers, upper and lowercase letters and symbols. It's off the charts. There's no chance someone's going to crack it from what they call a brute force attack. So yeah, I probably don't have time to go into this. Essentially, this email breach I was talking about is where like I said, scammers. And in this case, it was a well-known one, which was investigated. It was Nigerian pirates, would you believe it? And they have these universities where they teach these scammers all sorts of different roles. And essentially, you've got people on the computer. Once they've got the passwords, they're just trying to manually crack into, or not crack, log into your email. And when they get in, what happens is they're just sitting there waiting for invoices. So if you send invoices out of your account, that's what they want, because then they put a rule in place and they will start communicating with your customer and say, well, sorry, we've changed our account details. Here's a new invoice. They'll dupe your invoice, put a new one in. The customer will pay them. They'll disappear, and they're using Australian bank accounts too, which they've probably got from some sort of identity fraud. And by the time the police have investigated, the banks have investigated, they're long gone. The money's gone. You're probably not going to get it back. We have worked with clients on this exact breach multiple times. It's a very common one, and they've lost tens of thousands of dollars. Some clients, unfortunately. When I say clients, they were clients when they came to us, and now they are. It's unfortunate though, of course, as I said before. Yeah, so we talked about ChatGPT briefly, and I just wanted to say something quickly about that. And again, ChatGPT has multi-factor authentication. You've just got to go into the settings and turn it on. So I'd highly advise that, because you've probably got lots of confidential information in there. You know, just think about anything that you're using AI-wise. There's other ones I know. What data are you actually giving it? Because if you're using real names, real birth dates, real information, like a lot of people will just copy and paste an email and say, reword this for me, it's going somewhere. So you need to think about that. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying be aware that where you're sending this information, because it's going somewhere into someone's database, and the machine is learning about this, right? So yes, secure the accounts. Think about what data you're giving it. Perhaps omit confidential things like names and addresses and phone numbers and stuff if you can. Just be aware of it. This one might be my main point. And so, yeah, obviously there is, it does actually offer MFA now. We should have said does currently offer MFA, because for a while it didn't, but it does now. And you can also opt out of privacy and data collection, because that whole AI ChatGPT is a grey area in terms of where that data and who owns that data, where does it go? It's a very grey legal area at the moment. So there's a lot of talk about that at the moment. You can opt out, though. There are ways in the settings to opt out of data collection if you wanted to. Thank you, Shaz. Look, I don't think we're going to have time. So unless you guys are willing to stick around, like if you want to let me know, we can talk about some risks. Do you want to just jump in the chat and let me know if you've got time? Otherwise, we can. Okay, cool. Thanks, Morag. Thanks, Trish. All right. Well, I may as well. There's two, even if it's just two of you, that's fine. I'll keep going. We're almost at the end of it anyway. So top 3 risks. So even if you can't think of 3, just chuck in what are some of the risks. Now, based on what I've said, I might have given you some other risks that you're thinking about now, but what for you are some of the risks? Thanks, Steve. Good to see you again. Yeah, passwords. Yep. Thanks, Trish. These are some of the examples as well, if it gives you a bit of an idea or a bit of a clue, but these are some common ones. So Trish, if you don't have a password manager, it is really simple. A lot of these, by the way, the ones that I listed, they all have free accounts, which means you don't have to pay for it. If you're not in a team, that's perfect, and it's totally fine. If you are in a team, you probably need to go to their paid plans, because then you can start sharing passwords amongst the team and things like that, which is really, really handy. And then there's a single source of truth. So if you change the password, it changes for everyone. But there's also, if you're using, for instance, contractors or someone in the Philippines or someone from Upwork, right, and they need access to certain things, you can actually share out passwords from a password manager, and you can also mask the passwords. So the really clever thing about that is that they can then log into a site, but they'll never even see the password, so they don't even know what it is, but the password manager will let them log in. So that's really, really neat as well. But yeah, another one and two is, I don't know if any of you have a team, but bring your own devices. So really, businesses shouldn't allow employees to bring their own devices and use their personal devices to access company information. I know a lot of them do, because they relaxed that rule years ago, but now they're all starting to regret that, because it's really virtually impossible to Sorry, Trish, what was that? I'm not sure what you meant by that question. Oh, is that a risk? Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So if you have ideally, I think you're talking about big OO devices. Oh, password. Yes, you do. So yes, you do. So you've got an app on your phone, so that if you're on the road, you can actually access your passwords from that. And yes, it's on the computer. It's on any device that you want to, essentially. It's got a browser add-in as well. Even with the iPhone or the Android, it now integrates with browsers on there. So it's really, really handy. So if you go to log in there, you can just choose the password straight from the browser. You don't have to go into the app, copy and paste the password and put it into the to the login fields. But I mentioned website hacking before. Really, really important. If you use a site like thanks, Shaz. And by the way, a secure password, you might ask me, what's a secure password? Because you don't want a 20 character random password for your master password for your password manager. A really secure password is a sentence or a phrase. So that's like, it could be a line of a song. It could be like, I use the example, I love Paris in spring 2023 exclamation mark. So that ticks all the boxes. If you have capitals at the start of each word, and you also have a number, you got the symbol as well. So it's a long password. It's easy to remember because it's something that might mean something to you, and you're unlikely to forget it. So that's an example of a really strong password. Cool. So yeah, websites, if you're using WordPress, you need to have someone managing those updates. So whoever designed your website, if they're not managing your site, you need to find someone that will, because you can't just build a site and put it up and forget about it. It needs to be updated constantly. Otherwise, you're at risk of getting it hacked. And yes, it does cost, unfortunately. You'll have to pay someone to manage it and update it on a monthly basis, but you got to weigh up the risk. All right, so we are at the end. So I know we're a bit over. So thank you so much for your patience, and we did go over time. But we wanted to give you some free gifts, and so just to explain this one, so we have the first 4 you'll get. We'll work out with Business in Heels how to get them to you, but they're all really valuable. Obviously, the MFA checklist is like a common checklist of services that will link directly to the how-to guide on how to turn on MFA for those sites. There is a cybersecurity platform that's a partner of ours, called Cinch Security, and so it's a really simple platform, which is really great for smaller businesses in particular, but it will help you work within a framework and tell you your risks and ask you questions and put a plan together for you. They don't actually help you implement it though, so you'll still need like an IT provider or someone, or a lawyer in some cases. If it's a privacy policy or something, you'll still need to engage another party, but they will tell you that as well and say, oh, you'll need to speak to your IT provider, or you need to speak to your lawyer for this. But that's a really good platform and really nice. We use it for our clients as well. And then obviously that'll tell you the risks, the top risks in your organization as well. A cyber intelligence health check is something that it's like a questionnaire that we have, which will give you a score to see where you're at in terms of your cyber intelligence. And the last 3 they require a little bit more technical hands-on, because you have to install something on your computer or computers, because what it'll do, when I say you have to, we can help you there. So if you do want to do that, it will give you some information, pull some reports and give you a score, and we can explain what that all means. The phishing simulation, same deal. We'd have to set something up on your back end, but what it does is we can send out like fake phishing emails and see if you've actually paid attention, and if you're clicking on the wrong things, it will tell us, and we'll say, hey, you clicked on that link, and if it was a real one, you would be in a bit of trouble now potentially. Cool. This is just a bit of an example of when we work with clients, the journey, what we call to cyber intelligence mastery. So these are the different levels that I talked about. So when you do the cyber intelligence health check, you'll actually be able to put yourself in one of these categories. Obviously, we want to get to the certain level. Everyone will probably does. And if you're inconsumed, again, it's okay. But just this is we call this like the 5 futures. It's really, really interesting timeline, because you can see that if you don't do anything about it, the longer time goes on, the harder and harder it is to jump to those different levels. So great that you're here. Great that you've actually, thanks, Trish. It's all good. It's all good. Yeah, like I said, you're here. You've already done the first step, right? And it's never too late to turn it around and to actually make a difference. And there's some real core things that you can do to make a massive difference. You don't have to do everything right now. That's the thing. It's a journey. Cool. So this is a QR code, or you can just go straight to that URL. If you want to have another chat with me and go into a bit more detail, you can book in from here. Find a slot in my calendar, and I'd love to chat to you. Hope everyone enjoyed the session. Again, apologies for going over. But yeah, I really appreciate you being here and giving up your time on a Thursday, your lunchtime. I had fun. I hope you did too.
Thank you so much, Marty. That was very insightful. I've been taking lots of notes. I've got my paperwork all written out there. So thank you very much to you and Charmaine for coming along today. Obviously, we'll be making a lot of these links available to people post this event. And because we're recording today's session, obviously, if you didn't catch everything, you'll be able to rewatch it so that you can get all of that information and then actually be able to do that, and then perhaps start working through to get to that certain level that Marty talked about. So thank you, everybody, for coming along today. Really appreciate that. We'll have some more information out to everybody very soon. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.